Hello and welcome to Special Dialogue on TVRI World with me, Siska Becker. On this very special edition, we'll be talking about the strengthening of ties and the deepening relations between Indonesia and the state of Victoria in Australia. And for this very fascinating topic, we'll have our special guests. We have the very good fortune of having the Consul General, Mr. Kunchoro Giriwaseso from Melbourne, to talk with us. And also live here in the studio, we also have Pak Kusnanto Anggoro, political analyst on international relations. He's also the co-founder and executive director of Center for Geopolitics Risk Assessment in Jakarta, senior lecturer in postgraduate studies in University of Indonesia, among many other public roles in civil society reforms. We are very fortunate to have you both here in this very special session of Special Dialogue. Pak Kusnanto, thank you for coming to the studio.
Thank you so much for inviting me and getting involved in the discussion with Pak Consul General.
Of course. And Pak Consul General, Mr. Kunchoro, also, thank you so much for joining us from Melbourne, Australia. We know that right now it's around lunchtime in Melbourne, so hopefully we're not disturbing your lunchtime, sir.
No, it's okay, Siska. First of all, thank you very much for having me. And I remember that last time we have our discussion as well during the independent anniversary. And also I would like to wish a happy new year to Pak Kus and then also to you, Siska. May we all have a very good health, happiness, and prosperity.
Thank you so much for your thoughtful wishes. A happy new year indeed to both of you. Hopefully we'll have a better year in 2025. So, Mr. Kunchoro, if you don't mind, I would love to get right into a conversation about the bilateral cooperation in economic, education, and cultural sectors between Indonesia and Australia, in particular with Victoria. Now, maybe we can start by learning about the role of the Indonesian Consul General in Melbourne in strengthening relations between Indonesia and Australia, especially in Victoria and Tasmania. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Siska, for a very interesting question. I remember Pak Kusnanto is always my guru since my beginning of my career in foreign affairs.
Thank you,
but let me give a brief what we call a role of our mission here. As with any other diplomatic missions, the Indonesian Consulate General here in Melbourne, of course, represents the Indonesian government and work to advance and promote the Indonesian interests, particularly in Victoria. But remember, we are also covering Tasmania, a small island down under the continent. And we also contribute to the broader bilateral relationship between Indonesia and Australia, including by fostering diplomatic, economic, cultural and cultural relations. In doing so, we engage with various stakeholders, including Australian government, and then also, of course, state official, businesses community, and then educational institutions, of course, think tanks, and the Indonesian diaspora in the region. For that, we also facilitate dialogue and cooperation between Indonesian and Australian stakeholders, particularly to strengthen collaboration across various sectors, such as trade, investment, tourism, and also cultural exchanges.
All right, thank you so much, Pak Kunchoro, for outlining your very busy schedule as Consul General there in Melbourne. We'd love to learn more in so much more depth, but before that, let me now go to Pak Kusnanto. We would love also to learn more in a more broader perspective about the relations between Indonesia and Australia, especially now that Indonesia is entering a new phase in its journey with a new government. How is the bilateral cooperation between Indonesia and Australia as of now in the start of 2025, Pak?
Basically, without some exception, of course, the good relation between Indonesia and Australia has been maintained quite well. There are some political turbulence in terms of politics and security, for example. But basically, when we are discussing about other aspects of the relationship, on the economic sector, on the cultural dimension, and so on, basically, we have a very good relations. I think we and Australia of course, is developing many dimensions of relationship between this one. And the Consulate General of Indonesia in Melbourne, as well as the other Consulate General of Indonesia in other cities of Australia, like in Sydney, in Perth, in Darwin, and so on, of course, has been very positive contribution. Consul General in Melbourne has been doing so much on the improving relation between the two. And I am very optimistic that the relation will be flourished in the next couple of months. If you are looking at what's happening during the last couple of months, Minister of Defense Prabowo, while he is still Minister of Defense, in August 2024 already met with some Australian leader. They have a positive meeting. And the last meeting with the Australian Prime Minister in Lima, in Peru, when attending APEC, also very positive. So both countries, I think, agreed that they would enhance and strengthen the relation between the two. And of course, the Consulate General of Indonesia in Melbourne have very important role, though we have in most cases related to more limited aspect, especially with the economic dimension, with the cultural issues and so on. But do not forget that the very foundation of relationship among countries is basically cultural. Because when we have a good cultural relationship, meaning that you would improve about trust, mutual understanding, and so on and so forth. That an important factor that will be capitalized on the future, I guess.
All right, very fascinating. Thank you, Pak Kusnanto, for your very succinct explanation about the current condition of the relationship between Indonesia and Australia. Now, back to Pak Kunchoro. Maybe we can talk more about the challenges that you faced in promoting bilateral cooperation in economic, education, and cultural sectors, especially in Victoria and Tasmania.
Well, that is also a very interesting question. Of course, we always consider this kind of challenges, a situation what we have here. Now, let me begin with the economic challenges. The things that we recognize, particularly in the regulatory differences, the different standards and regulations between Indonesia and Australia can slow the flow of goods and services, including in key sectors like agribusiness and also manufacturing. So the way we have to address with this one. And we also recognize the market competitions. We have a lot of Indonesian products here, but often faced with the stiff competition from goods produced by other countries, from China, from India. Well, you know that particularly Australia has a very highly competitive market, so we have to address that one as well. And the things that we have also addressed also that the awareness gap, particularly with the many Australian businesses remain unaware of the extensive opportunities available in Indonesia, particularly in emerging sectors such as technology and creative industries. Despite those hurdles, of course, we continue to make strides by leveraging agreements such as ASEPA, and then engaging diaspora networks, and also enhancing the visibility of Indonesian products through the targeted exhibition and promotion that we always do that one.
All right, thank you, Pak Kunchoro, for not only highlighting the challenges, but also the opportunities that we have in enhancing economic ties between both countries. Now back to you, Pak Kusnanto. As Pak Kunchoro has already highlighted in his explanation, Indonesia's middle class have increased demand for Victorian premium food products as well, and professional services and education facilities. How do you think the Indonesian government should proceed to make sure that economic ties will only become strengthened in the coming years?
Yes, of course, everybody must be optimistic about that one for some reason, but of course there are some notes, very important notes. Despite the very fact that the Indonesian Consulate General has been doing a lot, especially on the cultural aspect, on the economic relationship between the two countries, but of course another factor should be also taken into account. Because at the end of the day, economic relations will be decided not only based on the mutual cultural understanding or the political aspect, but it's also about how perform actually Indonesia domestically in terms of, for example, easiness of doing business, and so on and so forth. unfortunately, the problem cannot be handled directly by the Department of Foreign Affairs or even by Consulate General Indonesia in Melbourne. Okay. However, I just learned that there will be some reform in the Department of Foreign Affairs, Indonesian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, for example, by re-establishing what in the past called a Director General for Economic and Trade. So that would, of course, positive, and I am very optimistic that eventually, at least the challenge that the Consulate General in Melbourne would likely to face in the coming years, hopefully is less than what Pak Kunchoro has been dealing with during the last 3 years or so. So, well, I am optimistic about this one as well.
All right, now on that optimistic note, we'll now take a short break, but don't go anywhere. Special Dialogue will be right back, and we'll be talking more about the education sector of the relationship between Indonesia and Australia, in particular in the state of Victoria and Tasmania. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Special Dialogue on TVRI World with me, Siska Becker, and my very special guest for today's edition, the Consul General in Melbourne for Indonesia, Mr. Kunchoro Giriwaseso, and the political analyst of international relations, Pak Kusnanto Anggoro, both here in the studio and in Melbourne, respectively, to talk about the relationship between Indonesia and Australia, in particular in Victoria and Tasmania. And as we promised before, we'll now delve into the education sector, also a very strategic sector in the relationship between Indonesia and Australia. Maybe we can go now to the Consul General first, Mr. Kunchoro. You mentioned about the Indonesian diaspora in Victoria, which consists of many students. Please tell us more in details about the Indonesian students in Victoria and Tasmania.
Yeah, Siska, before answering your question, I would also to mention the challenges that we are also facing, particularly in the educational sectors. As what I have mentioned through the economic sector, in the education and culture sectors, particularly the educational sector, the current challenges that we have is the declining of the Indonesian language studies in Australia. I have to mention that one because we have to work hard for increasing again or creating the Indonesian classes in some schools. The challenges that we are facing right now is the closure or the phasing out of the Indonesian language program in several local schools and universities. This decline is attributed to a number of factors, including, well, lack of qualified teachers, Indonesian language teachers. Also, the competition with, of course, the other foreign languages like Korea or Japanese, or even the French or Spanish here. However, we believe that there is still considerable potential for growth in the study of Bahasa in Australia. And for that one, the government is actively working on. And then with regard to the students, yes, we have around 5,000 or 6,000 students that we could not actually having a very exact figure. But what I have always mentioned that we are very proud of them, and they are very active. They study in several universities here that are very important one, and they are very active in promoting, and we make the collaboration with them. And of course, one thing that will make us very special is those students are really a very good citizens we have here of course, in Melbourne and Tasmania.
Yes, Mr. Kunchoro, as I understand, the Indonesian students in Melbourne in particular is actually quite active in their organization, in getting together, in helping each other. The PPIA is also very active in Melbourne, but maybe you can tell us more. How are they organizing, and how is the Indonesian Consulate General in Melbourne support the Indonesian students, especially maybe those who face academic challenges or even personal challenges?
Right. if I'm not wrong, that you are also one of the alumni of the university here in Melbourne, Siska.
That is true, Pak Kunchoro. Yeah, I graduated from Monash University.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. One of our flagship program is, well, that is including through the student, of course, is like having some organization, not only through PPIA, Persatuan Pelajar Indonesia in Australia, but also through some, what do you call, a youth friendship between Indonesia and Australia, including through the what we call as AIAF. This is the Australia Indonesian Association in Victoria. They organize the cultural exchange program and participate in every program that we have here in the Consulate General. For that one, of course, we should be grateful to them for promoting voluntarily, also collaborating with us through the consulate program.
All right, very interesting. Now, Pak Kusnanto, maybe you can tell us from your perspective, how significant is the education center in strengthening the relations between Indonesia and Australia, especially now?
It is very important. And of course, we are looking at what's happening in Melbourne, especially under the Consulate General of Indonesia, and considering the demography of the Indonesian diaspora in there, then education could well be very important for both countries, considering first, of course, that interest of Australian to learn Bahasa is in decline during the last 20 years.
That's quite unfortunate.
So. Yes, and Indonesia is becoming, Bahasa Indonesia, I mean, it's becoming less and less in many universities. If I remembering correctly, limited only on 13 universities in many Australian universities as well. So of course, it's going to be a challenge. But if you are considering the demography of the Indonesian diaspora in Australia, it could be important as well. There are some potential. We are looking at the demography, for example, and then you will be looking at that most of the Indonesian diaspora in Melbourne is basically professional, working on the clerical sector and managerial and so on, and the laborer is basically less than 10%, I guess. And meaning that all of those is basically someone or cluster of society who is very interested in educational issues, and they have actually some important role they could possibly play, I guess, about that one. So yes, very important. So the problem possibly is focusing on what actually then. And considering the priorities of Indonesia, I think vocational training is also important to be developed within the context of that. Of course, there's many Indonesian students in the Australian university and so on and so forth. The answer is yes, but vocational training is also important to becoming a new focus, at least a new impulse when developing the educational between Indonesia and Australia. Yes, yeah.
All right, we can all agree that students and all diaspora of Indonesia in Australia could play a vital role in people-to-people relations between Indonesia and Australia. So, Mr. Consul General, Pak Kunchoro, maybe you can tell us more about, has there been any recent initiatives that have been taken to empower the Indonesian diaspora in Melbourne in particular to contribute more actively to Indonesia-Australia relations?
Yeah, look, Siska, in several years, last several years, we've been having the initiative also conducting what we call as the Festival Indonesia. This is a very big event, which is not only what we call joined by the students, but also so many association of Indonesian communities here. As I can mention that we have right now like more than 90 Indonesian communities or association here. So this Festival Indonesia is regularly held in October every year. Last year, we have with the theme of promoting the East Indonesian culture, economic, whatever mentioned, like art as well. Now, this Indonesian festival or Festival Indonesia consisting of at least 3 cultural events, which is Indonesian Night, and then we have the Outdoor Festival Indonesia, and we have also the Festival Indonesia Goes to School. But the things that we also not left behind is that, including in that Festival Indonesia, we have also a business forum. This kind of economic forum. This is included in the Festival Indonesia. These events allowed the diaspora, particularly, to act as our cultural ambassadors. So they're also, well, becoming our ambassador in this case, in which they participate in showcasing Indonesian traditional music, dance, cuisine, of course. And on the other hand, the business forum that I have mentioned especially focus on highlighting the Indonesian business potential and fostering connection between Indonesian businesses and also the potential investor from Australia.
All right, thank you so much, Pak Kunchoro, for telling us about that very festive Festival Indonesia. Would love to attend one day. Hopefully we can. But now we're going to take a short break, but we have many more questions about the relationship between Indonesia and Victoria in Australia, especially concerning climate change and strategic cooperations. That's coming up next on Special Dialogue, so don't go anywhere. You're still watching Special Dialogue right here on TVRI World with me, Siska Becker, and still with my very special guest, of course, the Consul General of Indonesia in Melbourne, Mr. Kunchoro Giriwaseso, joining us live from Melbourne, and also Pak Kusnanto Anggoro, political analyst of international relations, who's joining me here in the studio. Now, this is our last segment, so I would love to go to the Consul General, Pak Kunchoro, and talk about another strategic sector in the relationship and cooperation between Indonesia and Australia, in particular Victoria, and that is the tourism sector. Now, as we know, Indonesians are not probably the largest group of visitors in Victoria, but we are one of the most significant ones, and Australians, on the other hand, are also coming more and more to Indonesia, and not just in Bali, but many other parts in Indonesia. But please tell us more from what you know based on your perspective and knowledge about the tourism cooperation between our countries, especially Indonesia and Victoria, Pak Kunchoro.
Yeah, let me apprise to the, Ministry of Tourism, who has been really collaborating with us so strongly. And every year they have also a program what we call as the tabletop or sales missions. They come directly from Jakarta to come here to promote, not only promote, but selling the the tourism destination in Indonesia. They attract more tourists to come to Indonesia. Well, then tourism, yeah, I agree that tourism plays a very pivotal role in fostering mutual understanding and also people-to-people connection, as it allows the people of the two countries to experience each other's culture, tradition, and custom. Now, for many Australians, Bali has become, they call it like a second home, a place where they return year after year to enjoy not only the beautiful of the landscape and beaches, but also the warm hospitality and unique cultural experiences that we have. Now, even more, for the first time, last year we recognized that one, for the first time since the Australian Bureau of Statistics has collected travel records nearly 50 years ago. In 2023, Indonesia replaced New Zealand as the top destination for short-term trips overseas by Australians. So it's really happy news for us. Therefore, tourism can also further boost investment and economic cooperation, such as through the provisions for more direct flight from Indonesia and Australia. We have already right now the direct flight from Jakarta to Melbourne through Garuda and Qantas. But also we have more than two, which is a direct flight from Denpasar to Melbourne. We have some low budget flight as well. That's what I can mention, Siska.
All right, good to know that more Australians are finding out more beautiful locations around Indonesia, not just Bali, because we do have a beautiful country, and it's good to know that you're enjoying it. So, Pak Kusnanto, if I can go to you now, especially when we talk about tourism nowadays, people always relate it to the topic of climate change. Now, in the topic of global issues such as climate change, how do you think Indonesians and Australians can work together, maybe at a local level, to address these challenges? Maybe in the tourism sector can present some opportunities
Well,
to do
climate change, I think, is becoming a global issue.
Yeah.
But we must also, at the same time, remember that climate change is multi-dimensional issues. We can discuss everything about it because can discuss about how to prevent, minimize the damage of climate change. But we can also make some preparation about this kind of stuff. So it's multi-dimensional, basically. We can approach a more technical way in some smaller issues like cooperation in the energy sector, how to saving the energy and so on, how finding out about the blue energy. We can also discuss about the technicalities of the global climate change, this kind of stuff. And one of the
never-ending topic indeed.
no, I think we must prepare ourselves first about what actually global climate change actually is all about. But if I am not mistaken, Pak Consul General already play a lot on that kind of issue, especially by making like a cooperation between Melbourne and Bandung, something like that, like city relationship among other. I think Pak Konjen actually can start on that issue on how about the environmental issues in Bandung and in Melbourne and so on and so forth. And considering that both Melbourne and Bandung is center of the academic research center and so on in both countries, it would run possibly quite well in the future.
All right, Pak Kunchoro, please elaborate on that. We would love to learn more.
Is it, Pak Kunchoro?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true, Pak. First of all, let me also mention about the what do you call it, climate change as a global issue. Addressing these issues, the climate change, has been, of course, the main priorities of the Indonesian government and Australian governments, and we are both highly vulnerable to its impact. And throughout the years, the two governments have worked closely. Well, I'm not able to mention in detail, but well, we recognize that one, and including in reducing emission, promoting energy transition, and then building climate resilient communities. Now, with regard to the what do you call cooperation between Bandung and Melbourne, both cities also already has twin cities sister corporations. Now, what we have is not only culture and economic, but also working for the Citarum-based community. This is to what do you call to enhance the effectiveness of having the river of Citarum. That is the thing that we are working on, and hopefully in the years ahead, we're also going to have some other various programs, particularly addressing the climate change issues.
All right, thank you so much, gentlemen. Our conversation has been nothing but so enlightening, but due to time constraint, we need to conclude our conversation. So to conclude our very informative chat, Pak Kusnanto, maybe we can have from you a very short statement on your hopes and wishes of the relations between Indonesia and Australia.
Well, I do expect that the both countries' relation will be flourishing in the next couple of in the future, basically, and many issues has already been discussed at one. But I just would like to emphasize that, especially on the economic aspect of the relationship, that irrespective of what Pak Kunchoro have been doing and will be doing, eventually the most determinant and decisive factor is a reform inside the countries of Indonesia. How we would be able to provide, for example, more simple regulatory issues, easiness of doing business, and so on and so forth. Because otherwise, Pak Kunchoro will be in trouble. I mean, you can't convince Australian people about the potential of Indonesia to improve economic relation with Australia, but at the end of the day, it was here in Jakarta where it should be improved a lot. So thank you, Pak Kunchoro. You have been doing a very important and remarkable job.
Thank you, Pak Kusnanto.
Thanks to you, Pak. Thanks to you, Pak. Pak Kusnanto is always my guru because, well, I've not always having the instruction from the government, but also listening to my guru, Pak Kusnanto.
Of course, you cannot mention this one, Pak, but I do. No problem.
Yeah, we're having a very warm reunion here. All right. Pak Kunchoro, maybe a very short statement from you, and maybe some messages for Indonesian students who are starting their semester in late February and early March, or maybe for professional workers of Indonesia coming to Australia soon, especially to Melbourne.
This is true, Siska. This is still holiday here in Australia. A lot of our students having some holidays other than outside of Victoria, but even also returning to Indonesia. Always working hard, study hard, make the study as your priority as the students, and then be a good citizens to obey everything of the rules and the regulation here locally. Work hard with us, collaborate with us to promote Indonesia in the future again. Thank you, Siska.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kunchoro Giriwaseso, Consul General in Melbourne for Indonesia. Thank you so much for joining us, and hopefully one day we can join you, Mr. Consul General in Melbourne, and enjoy a strong cup of coffee. That would be very lovely. And to you, Pak Kusnanto, thank you so much for joining us as well. And thank you for joining Special Dialogue on this very special edition with me, Siska Becker. We'll see you at the next one. Until then, take care.